Hi everybody, it's Kerrie here from the North East Autism Society. Thank you for joining us today for our live session. Today we're going to be talking about emotional well-being and autism, and we're going to do it in two different parts. So today is obviously part one, where we're going to talk a little bit about emotional well-being and kind of the reasons behind it, and then part two will be more about specific strategies. So what we're going to talk about really is going to be in a few different parts of the session. First of all, we're going to talk about emotional well-being and what that actually means. We're then going to talk about reasons that you may see behaviours in some of your children and some of your adults, and that can be quite difficult to pick apart because obviously they're all very individual. We're then going to do a little activity about anxiety and autism, and I hope that works because it involves some water and a couple of glasses, so fingers crossed that works. We're then going to talk about the ABCs of behaviour and give you a tool to start really looking at some of your individuals' behaviours and seeing what is actually happening for them and what strategies we can put in place from that. We'll obviously have a time at the end for questions, so I've got my colleague here with me, Lisa, and she's taking questions through the laptop, so please post them as we're going along. Obviously, if there's any unanswered questions at the end, I will get in touch with you personally. Hello, Lee Carden. Thank you for joining us. Nice to see you. I think you're a new face joining us on the Q&A, so always nice to have new people here. So what we're going to start with is talking about what is actually emotional well-being, and emotional well-being is really the foundations for everything we do on a daily basis. It's about understanding your own emotions and recognising them. It's about being able to regulate your own emotions and know when you're not feeling okay. It's also about resilience, so I refer to it as bounce back ability. It's about being able to carry on when things are going, pretty rubbish really. It also has links with self-esteem and self-confidence as well. So emotional well-being is really the building blocks and the foundations of life really, and if we don't get that right, then it's very difficult to teach children and adults things if we don't have that kind of on an even keel, so to speak. Okay, so emotional well-being for children with autism and adults is obviously equally as important as it is for anyone. And what we tend to see is we see behaviours. So we see behaviours that are manifested, that could be a physically aggressive behaviour. It could be the person withdrawing. It could be a verbal behaviour. It could be absolutely anything. But what we've got to work out is why are they doing that? What is going on for that individual and why is this presented? So what we often talk about is an iceberg theory. So the iceberg, if you think about it as obviously a triangle, what happens at the top of the iceberg is the observable behaviour. So that is your child comes in from school and starts kicking the wall, for an example. What we've got to work out is what is happening just before that behaviour occurs, and we refer to this as the antecedent. So the antecedent is really the trigger. It's the kind of loading the gun, and the gun goes off and then you see that observable behaviour. Now, what we have to get very good at is tracking these behaviours. So only through tracking behaviours can we work out why they are doing that and what the actual function is, okay? Now, we use something at NEAS and it's a well-known technique for tracking behaviours. It's called an ABC chart. Now, basically what an ABC chart does is if you've got a child that's exhibiting certain types of behaviours, you log it for a day, a week, a month, a year. It really does depend on the individual. Now, you put in the behaviour, so a child hits head off a wall, what happens just before, which is the antecedents, and what happens afterwards, so what is the consequence of that behaviour. So sometimes we get in a situation where we're actually reinforcing the behaviour. So for example, we had a young man in a school many years ago who started screaming at rhyme time. He would scream every time rhyme time happened. Now what had happened initially is he got taken to the sensory room to calm down. He really likes the sensory room. So now every time he does rhyme time, he screams and he gets taken to the sensory room. So what had actually happened in that instant is it become a learnt behaviour, because he knew, he was a very intelligent little chap, he knew I do this and I get that response. So it's really important that you check your consequences, because sometimes we are actually reinforcing that behaviour. On this sheet you will see that there's a column for additional, so that is, is there somebody in the street with a mobile phone? Is there a baby crying? Are you in a room that's got horrendous lighting? that stuff is just as important as the ABC part, because sometimes it can be the tiniest thing that's actually causing that behaviour to happen, okay? Here at NEAS, we would initial them as well, so we'd say actually who was involved in supporting the child at that point, because that's really important, because sometimes we can be a trigger. So it could be something as simple as the perfume I wear could be a problem for a child that has olfactory hypersensitivities. It could be that they can't work out my unusual accent, so that they don't enjoy working with me, and then that creates a behaviour, okay? So it's important to know who was involved at the time. It's also important to know which environment you're in. So, you know, if every Friday at 2 o'clock your little chap gets really upset in school and he cries and gets quite anxious, it could be that every Friday at 2 o'clock he's in the sports hall. And it could be that there's terrible strip lightings that he can't cope with, and the echoing of a sports hall is too much for him. So the environment is really key, and we talk about that a lot in autism, how important getting the environment right is for our individuals, okay? So what I would definitely recommend is if you download that from our website, if you are having problems working out why your child or your adult is doing a certain thing, keep a track of it, and certainly, you know, we can have a chat with you over the phone about that as well. The other thing this shows is patterns of behaviour. So without this, you can't actually find the patterns. This is really the baseline. It's the point to start from, okay? The next thing we're going to talk about is anxiety, because we know through research that people with autism have a higher level of stress chemicals in their body than what we might have, okay? So when they wake up in the morning, they're already stressed. We start at a baseline. Their baseline tends to be much higher than what ours is, okay? Now, I'm going to do a little activity with some water. We've not done activities in these Q&A sessions before, so we don't know if it's going to work because we don't know the exact angle of the camera. So please stay with me. I'm going to move you around to my apparatus. I'll put you here. Okay, right, everybody should be able to see that. Hi Lisa, thanks for joining. Right, what I'm going to show you is you're going to have to be very creative here, okay? And you're going to have to imagine that this is a young person. So it's just a glass with a flower on. So this young person is called Stephen. Now, Stephen doesn't have autism, okay? This here is, I'll just show you, is anxiety. It's actually a jug with water in, but for the purpose of this, it's a jug of anxiety, okay? So, Stephen gets up in the morning and he feels okay. Stephen goes to school and he's forgotten his homework, so he gets told off by the teacher. Stephen then goes to PE and he's forgotten his PE kit, so he gets told off by the teacher again. Stephen then goes for lunch and there's no fish fingers, so he's really upset because he loves fish fingers. So he's having a bit of a rubbish day. Stephen then goes to his science lesson and he doesn't understand the lesson, and it's really difficult, and he gets himself quite stressed out about it, okay? Stephen then goes to get the school bus, and there's some people on the bus that aren't very nice to him, and they call him some names, and he's feeling, really upset. Stephen gets home and his mum tells him that he's got to tidy his room because it's an absolute tip, okay? So Stephen tidies his room, but he also recognises that he's had a bit of a rubbish day, okay? So what Stephen does is he plays on his Xbox for a little bit, he has a cup of hot chocolate, he has a hot bath, goes to bed, wakes up and feels much better, okay? So this is Alex. Alex has autism, okay? Alex wakes up in the morning and feels stressed. Alex goes to get the school bus and it's late. Alex goes to the lunch hall and there's too many people in there, and it's total sensory overload for him. Alex then goes to PE and has to wear them shorts that really irritate his skin, and he's feeling really uncomfortable. Alex goes for lunch and there's no fish fingers. Now, Alex always has fish fingers on a Monday. It's really important that he has them. Alex goes to his English lesson and his teacher gives him a lesson that he just doesn't understand. Okay, so there are a couple of differences, main differences between Alex and Stephen. The boy with autism already started off up here. So we start off somewhere down here. So he's already at tipping point. So you could say something to your child like, go and get your PE kit ready for school, and you see this kind of meltdown, if you like, and you think, my goodness, I only asked them a question. The point is that they're already at tipping point. They've already reached that kind of plateau, if you like. The other difference really is self-regulation. So we know how we're feeling. We know when we've had a rubbish day, and we know what to do to make ourselves feel better. So we have a rubbish day, we're up here, we'll do things, we'll walk the dog, we'll have a glass of wine, you might go out for your tea, you might have a run, whatever it is, you do it to make yourselves feel better. Now, a lot of our individuals struggle with that, so we have to teach them self-regulatory strategies, and we'll talk more about that next week. But that's really, really an important, it's one of the foundations of well-being, is knowing how you're feeling and know how to make yourself feel better, okay? The anxiety as well for that, the young man with autism, built up much quicker, and that is very common. So 1 minute you feel okay, the next minute you've gone from 0 to 100 very quickly, and we see that quite a lot in a lot of our individuals. Now, if for that young man we had, and I'll just show you this again, but if we had thought about him in, you know, if he's in a school setting and he's getting himself stressed and he's having a bit of a rubbish day and his anxiety's starting to fill up, so at lunchtime, we give him a sensory break. So he goes and does his sensory diet. He's still a bit stressed, and he goes to his English class, and he has a support worker that helps him. And when he's getting a bit stressed, he's able to go out to a quiet room. Already you can see from a couple of simple really strategies that anxiety is decreasing, and that's what we need to do. We need to be proactive. We need to get in there before we actually see the tip of the iceberg, before we see that behaviour. Okay, so I'm just going to ask Lisa if we have any questions. Lisa, yeah. Do we have any questions?
Not yet.
We don't have any questions. Does anybody have anything? If you just pop them through now. I can see that Lisa's joined us as well. Hi Lisa, looking forward to seeing you and Dylan this afternoon as well. If we don't have any questions right now, what you can do is you can post them in at a later date. You know, you can contact us via email or ring us up. I'm getting some likes and some hearts, which is always good. Emma's just actually sent a question, actually. How do we teach our children to verbalise their hidden anxiety? Okay. There's a lot of different ways, which we are going to talk about in part 2. But you need to find out, I suppose, first of all, what's making them anxious. So what is them trigger points? And then working with them for them to identify their own feelings around anxiety, because you know yourself, if you're feeling anxious, you might get sweaty palms, your heart rate might race, you might go dizzy. So it's about teaching them what are the signs of me getting anxious. I suppose that's really one of the first starting points. But we will talk more about specific strategies next week, Emma, but thank you for your question. If nobody's got any more questions, we are going to leave it there. So our next session is going to be Emotional Wellbeing Part 2. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the strategies that we use here at NEAS and some of the resources that families have used as well over the years. So we hope that you enjoyed that. If you give us a little like, if you found it useful, I hope you all have a lovely weekend, and I shall see you all soon. Thank you.